And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 4x3. We're really rolling these things out nonstop. We're doing great work here recently, so good stuff from
Yeah.
from that Paladin and Yokai.
Obama medal meme there. Like,
We're doing great work. We're doing great work, guys. Pat on the back.
Listen, I'm
Pat on the
proud
back.
of us. I'm
It's,
proud of us. We're really sticking to this. So
soldiers,
I'm just proud.
soldiers out there.
Yeah. But we're joined here by DarfMike. You know him, you love him. If you've ever been in a stadium recently, you've seen him. So, Mike, man, appreciate you coming on. We have a little special episode for you. We're talking about CS2 / North American Counter-Strike. We're just joining this special together.
There we go. Little NACS, baby. That's the stuff I'm about. Let's get into it.
All
I
right.
barely know how this works, but I'm ready. My body is ready.
Well, there's nothing better than learning on the fly. So we'll
That's
give you
how
a
we
quick-
play our games.
we all love
That's how
it.
we
We all love
that's
it.
how we approach utility. So we'll just keep it consistent here.
All right. Well, Ani, I think we got your point up first here, so you can go ahead and introduce this one.
Well, we'll introduce the concept first. Basically, Mike, we have 4 guests, as you can see, and we have 3 topics that we're going to go through. That's where, hence 4-3. And we'll have each topic you can basically pick between strongly agree, strongly disagree, disagree on the spectrum as you'd like. And we'll basically match up each of our opinions one by one, and then we can kind of have a free-for-all discussion about it. Discussion / debate. Depends on how you want to take it. I mean, Neo loves to kind of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, but I'd like to be a little bit more analytical.
It's a way of
but-
culture.
But yeah, well, I'll get into my first topic. Anyways, MR12 is better for Counter-Strike. This isn't necessarily my opinion, but I think it is a huge conversation point as of right now. And I think a lot of us, I mean, all of us here have played a lot of Counter-Strike too, so we've dabbled in the new format, and we're also all broadcast talents, so I'm sure we'll have opinions on that. So I'm very curious to see where everyone lies, because I'll be honest, I don't necessarily find myself on either side of the spectrum, funnily enough. I'm kind of stuck between two, and I'm very curious to see where you guys are interested in leaning towards, so I can kind of formulate my own opinion.
So as the guest, do I get to go
Yeah, you
first?
need to go first. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead, yeah,
let
go
me
ahead.
hop in there. All right, so I have a fun thing, which is that my lights change color, so I'll try and adjust that. That's green if you can't tell. I strongly agree. And I mean, this is basically a 2-part question, which is really you should probably separate it for the pro scene and casual play, right? It's there's 2 aspects of it. For casual play, I think it's an improvement. I think that sitting down for a game and knowing it could take a full hour, this is a lot more approachable. Yeah, maybe comebacks don't happen as wildly, but I think you still get the full cycle of a game in MR12. And talking about pro, because I think that's really what's important here, I think it's going to be an improvement as well. I think some things might continue to need to be adjusted, but honestly, I don't feel like the economy's in a terrible place. Obviously, we'd like to have the pistol round be a little less influential. I think if they bumped default loss bonus, that might help fix it and just have more consistent gun rounds. I think it was Steel floating that at one point. But the big concern is if we're going to lose these brilliant comeback stories, if we're going to lose these brilliant down and then back stories. And the reality is, we talk about how much of Counter-Strike is a mental game so often, right? CS is hugely a mental game. And to me, once pros have adjusted, once pros have gotten used to it, being 12-6 is going to be the same as being 15-8. Right? Mentally, it's all about getting over that hump. Mentally, it's all about closing out that last round. Mentally, it's all about, oh my God, our backs are against the wall. We can't save anymore. We just got to play. And so that same psychological battle that you see happen so often in a pro Counter-Strike game, where closing a map is the most difficult thing a team can ever do, I think that's still going to happen in MR12. I don't think that's going to change. I think things are just going to be a lot more digestible as a viewer experience. I mean, I think as well, there's maybe a bit of disconnect for talent in the green room, because once you're there, right? You're getting paid. You're happy to be there. You're excited. You're invested. But if somebody's tuning in on a Sunday afternoon, it's tough to devote 5 hours to a damn BO3, 4 hours to a BO3. Tech delay comes in. Suddenly you're so slowed up. And I think that MR12 is just going to speed things up a little bit, especially, we've just gotten to a point where the game is so developed, there's so much information that a lot gets packed into every round. So I'm fully in on MR12. I'm about it. Having played it, I've enjoyed it a lot. I'm really excited to see pros approach it.
Neil?
I want to.
I mean,
Okay, you go ahead.
no, Cold.
Okay.
Please take it away.
So
my friend.
I just want to follow up there and say I 100% agree with you on the mental battle. I think that Counter-Strike is so much a mental game, and that's going to be the biggest deal. There's just going to be new realities that you kind of have to accept. I mean, I know it is happening. Like, that has been confirmed, right? That MR12 is going to be taking place. So we're going to be seeing that no matter what. And I feel like the economy, the only thing I want to see change here is the economy for the CT sides is actually devastating just from experience there. Again, I don't make the best financial decisions when I play the game, but
You buy every round. Just say it.
yes,
Eagle,
yeah,
Eagle, every round, full investment.
yeah, but there's just not enough options for the CT side, I think, to make it a little bit more scary. And that's where my big concern is right now with MR12 is that you see a lot of times T side rosters get off to really good starts when they win the pistol, they win the first gun round, and then bam, that's half of the half right there. Done and dusted, and you don't have a lot of room to come back, and it's very difficult to manage economy. Like, if you win a 1v1 clutch on the T side, and you drop the last CT, and then you win the next round, and then you lose a little bit of that loss bonus, and then you're right back to an eco, you're right back to where you started, and you're actually just like nearly full reset like the old days where you have no money. So the one concern that I have for R12 is that we're not going to see T side teams come off, or CT side teams come off, and we're going to see a lot of I would say weirder results when it comes to that sense, and more, I guess, weight on what CT sides can do.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to kind of take it away off from that. So this for me is actually quite an interesting discussion in the sense that I spent all day on this discussion alone. I'm currently working on a video which is essentially this exact question, but in a longer form. And I spoke to a variety of different people, including, so I spoke to kind of Anders, Nero, AZS, Davey, just because they were very vocal when this was first came out. So I want to see kind of where they stood. So I've kind of
Neo just name dropping for his next video. He's getting the stinger right now. That's a professional right there.
Stay plugged
Well,
in.
That's a
say,
content creator,
textbook,
baby. You
textbook.
always be
Which one was
plugging.
grind? Yeah, check it out. Coming out the weekend. No, I don't know when it's coming out. I have no idea. But basically, I've been working out, and essentially, I picked those four because they were actually across the spectrum in a similar way that we have, where it's like, for example, Anders is very pro MR12, where like AZS is a hater, like thinks the worst idea ever. So it was good to get like a good variety here. Go on.
Clarification: Elliot will be a hater for anything,
Yes.
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
Elliot is a born hater. That man wakes up and he hates.
exactly. So it was good kind of hearing the variety of kind of reasons. So I've been trying to figure out where I stand because I was very much on the fence, and I think generally speaking, I'm in favor of it. I think it is better for Counter-Strike. So I do lean, maybe not as far as Mike, but I think that comes with a couple of stipulations, which for me, I feel. So I think for a casual, this is great, right? I think I have a lot of friends who are casual CSGO fans who like keep up to date with like what I'm doing in my career just because like I went to school with them and shit. But like they won't sit and watch a whole best of 3 if it goes 3 maps, or a best of 5. Like they'll watch 1 map, maybe, and then they're not going to watch like an 8-9 hour fucking game. It's just that for them, it's just not a thing. So I think that will be a world in which potentially these guys stick around and watch a whole series and maybe actually get a bit more into the scene itself. And actually that's when they can start to kind of have the love that we have of the game, where they actually get sucked into the storylines because they stick around for the whole time. Because only like maybe a couple hours, 2.5, which is a lot better. And that graph that Edge TV did, which was like where it compares to traditional sports, like
Insane.
It's pretty. When you put it in that sense, it's pretty intense. Like I always thought that American football was insane because of how many ad breaks. But if it's like an average best of 3 goes 3 matches outdoing an American football game, that for me is like kind of insane. So yeah, like I think generally for the casual fan, it's really good. I don't see any downside, especially like for me and my friends as well. In CSGO, we would only ever play short games anyway because we just want to go through all the maps every night.
I got an interesting stat on that as well. I looked on Leadify recently, and their website was like they were like hiring for new employees, and they were looking for people that were like interested in finding new stats using like Leadify's data as like part of their content product. And they said that short games, we call them shorties there in our like group, they're actually more popular than long games in matchmaking. So like
I
that
think
to
so,
me
right?
is a
Because
bit wild.
it's a commitment.
Because short games are actually such a watered down version. Like it's the extreme of like MR12, right? It's what, MR8. So it's like
better economy,
very
right?
intense. It does have a little bit different in the loss bonus, which I did appreciate that they added that. But it's definitely a watered down version of the game, and people ate it up, and I think it shows why exactly they're making this move to MR12 for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like an average long game is what? It's like 45, 50 minutes. It's like an average game. So it's pretty rough. Like, it's quite a commitment. And like even like like you guys playing the game before this, right? You can be like, if it's like an MR12, it's not the biggest commitment. Like, oh fuck, we can get one quickly done. It's not the end of the world unless it goes OT and whatnot. And then even recently as well, I've had games playing MR12 CSGO and they've gone to OT. I'm like, fuck me, this is long.
Yeah.
Not realizing that's actually just
That's a normal game.
Go.
Yeah.
Normal game,
Like,
yeah.
shit, dude. Like, so yeah, I think for the casual view, it's sick. I think in the pro scene, it's a good thing overall, but I still think there's a couple of changes that need to be made alongside it. They all can't be done at the same time because this is a point that Anders brought up. I think it's spot on. Like, if Valve were to make multiple changes at one time, they don't know where the problem is or where the solution is because it's spread across multiple things. So they've got to do one step at a time. But I think, there's a few changes that need to be made in terms of the economy, whether it's maybe lower the bomb plant bonus for T's. 800 is quite a lot, right? Where they can just continue rolling with 800 800 on loss bonus for a T is just that's a buy every single round. Where maybe like something like to incentivize CTs, so 400 for a defuse maybe, just to give them money to incentivize giving a go. Because at the moment we have a big problem where MR12, yes, it shortens the game, but it's not going to change fundamentally how the game's played. Like, it's still the same round time. Smokes are going to be a bit longer now as well in CS2, and they feel longer anyway, and they're much wider generally. I feel like it takes forever to get out of the smoke.
Corners are, yeah, right.
Yeah, so you've got now this thing where it's not going to incentivize things like retakes or for people to give a go into rounds. So it's still going to be equally as the same amount of saves. And this is something kind of Dave, you said, where if you think of it like a fraction, right? There's less rounds, but there's still the same fraction of like how many rounds are given a go and how many people save, per CT side or whatever. So I think, yeah, it's good overall. I still think a few more things need to be changed alongside it. Maybe just something to incentivize the CTs not saving every round, right? Because this is the meta we're in currently. I mean, obviously, really sparked off the back of kind of VP and Jame, right? But I'm now started to see it, sadly, being brought into the breach. Fucking Kicker is plagued UK CS now, staving, and they insta pick into Inferno every game as well. So I'm gonna claw my eyes out. But yeah, this is the thing. This is the meta right now. Is just like saving because it financially is completely the right decision. It makes sense. It's just boring, and that's an issue that I think maybe needs to be in some way changed. But I don't think it'll be changed yet. I think obviously they got to kickstart the game, do MR12, and then just essentially what Valve always do and what they always have done is just look at the data, and it's as simple as that, right? We had the same problems when we saw back years ago when the Tech9 was so OP or the CZ was so OP. It just took people abusing it to then for Valve be like, okay, we need to fix this. And this is the same thing that's probably going to happen when the economy of T-side is just fucked. People snowball and get 7-8 rounds of like no repercussions. This is what it's going to. So I think it's a good thing, but more changes need to happen. But at what point we'll see them, I don't know.
My first knee-jerk reaction to this was I was just so vehemently against it because my love for the game comes off of watching the pros play. I don't care how the game is for myself. I play it a lot, but man, if I was locked out of playing Counter-Strike and I was forced to only watch, I would only watch it, and I would be totally fine with that. So my perspective on MR12 purely came off the basis of how are the pros going to feel about it, and does this actually make that experience better? And I think the initial response was always like, I always think about the greatest IGLs that we have in the game, and they always treat the game, treat each half like a story, right? They build on ideas initially off the first couple of buy rounds, and by the end, you get to this huge crescendo, and that's where a crazy round 30 call happens. That's been built off of all of the previous rounds, building up to that point, and you get this insane ending to that story, and that is now going to get essentially neutered. And that was my biggest worry, that whole idea gets neutered with the fact that you have less buy rounds to play with, so you can't take as many risks anymore. You can't feel out the opponent's style all too much. You kind of have to focus on your plan A and kind of stick to it, because you don't have time to actually take risks and take the road less traveled or whatever. But now you're pigeonholed in that sense. And so that's what was my first biggest worry when it came to that. And then the other thing is, of course, you guys have all touched upon it, it's the economy. And I don't think that it feels very fair right now for CTs especially. And I think there isn't any incentive to go for retakes at this point either when it comes to the bomb radius. The bomb radius is something you guys didn't mention, because that is just obscenely large now. Yeah. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I think every pug that I've played in, you just feel like I think more often than not, I just say to myself, I'm dead, because
Yeah, I
nine
mean,
times out of 10, you usually are.
it's even showing up in our games where like no one ever saved in matchmaking games in like MR12 or CSGO even, right? There was very little saves. I felt like everyone would always go for a retake there, even if it felt impossible, just for the fun of it, right? And now we're seeing a lot more saves because I think the bomb radius is actually getting people to stay on the other side of the map instead of even like walking forward and trying to retake.
And
So
look,
it's
man,
showing up in like the lowest levels,
yeah.
right? So
Exactly. If the casuals are going to do it, think about how much min-maxing is going to
yeah.
happen at the top end of the spectrum, right? I think that there are so many situations now where you treat every round so much more than you did previously that, again, it's back to the risk-taking. The thing that makes Counter-Strike so exciting for me is when teams decide to throw shit at the wall because they realize we have no other choice. We cannot save. We can't do anything in this situation. We have to go for it. Or we have to take a risk on a specific part of the map and force the other side to take a risk elsewhere. And it's that back and forth, that give and take, that makes Counter-Strike so special. And if you're basically pigeonholing a lot of teams and players to play a specific style where once the bomb goes down, we're not even going to really treat it like it's a new phase of the game. We're just going to give it off and kind of just axe that part of the round out. At least that's my doom and gloom version
Yeah.
of it. I don't necessarily know how it's going to actually play out, but that's kind of how I perceive it, if this is how the casuals are treating it.
I'll step in for a rebuttal. I do agree that incentivizing retakes or lessening the punishment for a failed retake would be a good step as a next step to fix the economy. But in terms of the idea that the chess match between IGLs, because it's going to be time shortened, won't be as impactful, I disagree with that. I think it harkens back to my point about the psychology, where you're just going to have, you know, each decision matter more. I think you're not going to see as many of these rounds where you'll see it sometimes where a team goes for like a failed T side execute, but they can justify it to themselves. They're like, well, we missed one thing or one flash or we didn't check this corner, so let's do it again, but try that again. That's going to have a lot more impact. Those kind of calls where it's like, okay, this didn't work. Do we really want to risk trying it again? I think it's going to condense the kind of calls of like the gambles, the evaluations, the like, can we really risk attempting this again? Do we need to keep mixing things up? I think that kind of human drama is just going to be condensed a little bit in terms of the chess match.
The counter to that, like, also, I think conditioning is like a huge part of that, right? So you only have so many rounds to throw fast plays out, throw like things that will make your like opponent's CT side like disrupt and
I'll
change
give a
up
good
how they're playing.
example, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll give a good example of that. We'll talk about probably the best map of Counter-Strike that I remember watching, and it's that ancient map between FaZe and ENCE that went to a bajillion overtimes in Dallas. Round 30, where Kerrigan calls that double fake back into the A bomb site. I went back and watched the demo. That comes down to the fact that he's made a couple B pops with specific amounts of utility, and he's done that 3 or 4 times in terms of buy rounds, and he's also feigned A presence as well. And we basically takes all of the buy rounds that he had throughout the half and he combines it to make that final call at the end. And that really, after experiencing that firsthand, I've just realized I was so drawn to like MR15 so much more, realizing that if they hadn't had an extra A round to go, or hadn't had an extra B pop to go through, maybe ENCE don't bite there. Maybe they do stick to 3A, and then all Kerrigan's conditioning is just useless at that point. I don't know. It's definitely semantics,
Yeah.
but I definitely feel like if he did have those extra buy rounds, that's why that round could be called in the way that it was, you know?
In MR12 as well, that game's done like 13-10. So it's like you do lose
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I mean,
you do lose the
But
match.
the psychology, okay, so the psychology of a team like FaZe, you want to talk about a head case, let's talk about FaZe, right? They're the perfect example of like FaZe with their backs against the wall versus FaZe in the early rounds is a completely different beast. So why not get to the interesting phase earlier, right? Because clearly for them, it's psychology. We know they are ridiculously talented players from, back to front. We know they are enormously capable individuals. We know they have the strategy. We know they have one of the greatest IGLs of all time, if not the greatest. So why are they shitters on map 1, on group stage map, why are they so slow to wake up? Because they need that blood in the water, man. They need that blood in their mouth to say, now it matters. This round matters. Can't lose here. So why not get to that 3 rounds earlier? Why not?
I think fundamentally that will happen. I think the MO of like how IGLs figure things out, like basically we're going to look towards, I mean, this is all kind of what we have now, where it gets into the last kind of 4 or 5 rounds, and then IGLs are really figuring out how each other works, and then becomes this chess game. You know, it takes a good few buy rounds to get there to figure out kind of what the setups are looking like on both sides. We're going to get there earlier. I do worry though about whether we just don't have the buy rounds to work with, or like you see a lot of IGLs who are they're pretty akin to go for a force buy, especially the CIS teams. They love a force buy for kind of no reason basically. And now if they're stuck on the CT side, they're just going to be stuck with very few full premium buy rounds. That's what worries me more, where it's like we're going to get to these rounds of where it should be a very good mental chess game, but then they just don't have the weaponry to work with, or because only 2 remained alive, not 3, they actually make a net loss overall in the long term. Things like that worry me more. So I think it's going to be brought to kind of the fruition earlier. I think we are going to see. I think also IGLs who are more aggressive are going to be rewarded in CS2. It feels like, I think like, especially for my games at the moment, if you go into like, let's say like B-Site Inferno, if you fly away into B-Site Inferno, get a smoke down Coffer and a smoke down CT, it takes fucking forever for those smokes to go, that you can do like, you know, over a third of the bomb in that time. If someone resmokes CT, and that's it. Like, I feel like there's just no chance of getting back in unless they're like
Well, that's also
flying through
Inferno
what feels like an
and
endless
Go.
smoke.
So what you're
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
is
yeah.
art on top. That's what I'm hearing.
Hey,
Curious
like,
tag,
honestly,
baby.
like, it feels like
That would be
aggro
great.
IGLs are going to be like, which actually then again adds to our point of how ML
That's
is gonna be
exciting
better,
game.
right? It makes
Yeah.
exciting counter. It makes actually the CTs have to then counter the aggression. You have to fight fire with fire, basically, right? So then you have to get aggressive yourself, which then would, in theory, lead to much quicker games. But this is all in theory. I don't know how things will pan out, but definitely from what I've played in like my pugs, it feels like everything benefits right now. Peak is advantage, obviously. That I know that isn't a bit of an issue, but it is just the part of the game right now. I don't know whether they're going to get around to fixing it or amending it in any way. But then also just if you get the site, you are in such a big chance of a win in comparison. Like, I think percentage-wise compared to CSGO, it feels like you have a much higher percentage of surviving a retake on 2 than you do on Go, which is massive. So I think it incentivizes you to be super aggro, super early.
Yeah, I think if we could return to a 2013-esque style, that's kind of what I'm feeling like, where it is just the mechanics are what makes you good, and then
Buggers
you
galore.
have a little bit of structure here and there to kind of get you over the line, and your defaults feel a lot looser than it was in kind of current Go, where you do have a player on a specific extremity, you have another player extremity, and then you have your pack going through trying to meander through the map. Instead, you might just have a couple buddy positions here and there to just try to trade your way into a site, and then everybody just congregates, or we just get a death ball outright, like an NIP, you know.
I think that's just the nature of new things, right? New game, new map. You see it all the time as the meta develops on like a new map, and so it's just going to be some of the new stuff with CS2 in terms of how utility is different or whatnot. It's just the same thing happened with Go, right? Early on, it's a lot looser gameplay, and then as more eyes are on, as more analysts are picking through demos and whatnot, it becomes more structured. You have more and more development come in. That's just the nature of it. But what I want to know is, Ani, are you taking a side in this? Or you just fence sitting? You leaving your portrait fence sitting? What's going on here?
So I was very doom and gloom for this entire bit, right? But I'm actually leaning a little bit more to the agree side. And you know, I will always think that MR15 is probably the better way for me to consume Counter-Strike, because I will watch any amount of Counter-Strike at any point in the time. But the question at the end of the day is, MR12 is better for Counter-Strike, and yes, it absolutely is. We want to grow the game. We need to make it a little bit more palpable for the average viewer, and this is the best way to do so. I mean, it makes our lives a lot easier, that's for sure. I mean, broadcast days can get very long when it comes to some of these best of threes. And again, I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with putting that much energy into that long of a product. But of course, as a viewer going to actually catch up with that, I don't necessarily think so. There might be a pretty hardcore base that's been around for Counter-Strike for so long, but in terms of actually growing the game into something even bigger to try to make it more mainstream, this is the next route in. And you want to attract other countries into the game, again, you just have to make it so that, look, your competition is like League of Legends, your competition's Valorant, your competition's actually I'm not gonna use.
We're just
Dota
gonna
for
start
example.
jangling keys in front of the, get the young ones in.
Yeah,
Get
that's
them
what
like
it
little
needs to be,
baby
right?
mobiles.
The game is brighter. The game has a lot more agents going to be involved in this. I'm sure there's going to be brighter skins, and you're gonna try to just get in this crowd. And I think that would be so big for our scene. And if we're talking about a faster game, let's not forget China thrives in that type of Counter-Strike. And if we could have a Chinese team come into the forefront of pro Counter-Strike, this could be just huge for our scene. So I think I will just lean in those since those positives exist, even though I'm not necessarily completely in it in terms of my viewer experience. I think for the good of everyone, I think it is still very exciting to make the game much faster.
I mean, fundamentally as well, more people that come and watch means more incentives for tournaments, more TOs,
Yeah.
more games, and of course more games. More work for us, boys. Let's fucking get it. Let's get
Yeah,
this
I'll
shit
go
on,
ahead
bro.
and-
Let's
That's
fucking
why
go,
my
baby.
backdrop's green right now. It's actually for the
Let's-
money.
Let's get
Nothing to
this
do
shit
with
going.
how I
Skrilla.
agree.
I jumped
Yeah,
over
genuinely,
as well.
there is a lot of positives, right? Especially, I think the thing you mentioned that really is the big thing for me is if you can incentivize Asia to play. I think just there isn't enough of that kind of core love in Asia. They have like the real niche community there, but
They're
I mean,
hardcore, yeah.
yeah, if you compare like, and obviously I know it's kind of a bad comparison, but at the same time a good one. But Valorant, right? Some of the best teams in the world are in kind of like places like Korea and Japan, for example, which just have just no look in CS. So if we can get some of those countries involved too, that'd be fucking cool. And I think this is a very good way for them to be like, well, you've done it in Valorant, why not come and do this in CS, right? So it's like they did it to us in a way where they took some of our youngsters and some of our maybe untouched regions. Why can't we kind of do it in a similar vein, right, on the way back? Especially now that kind of the Valorant tier 2 scene is like just fucking dead, right?
Yeah.
Why don't they be like, well, tier 2, you can make a living in tier 2. Like it's actually very doable.
To be fair, Valve has had 20 years of neglecting the Asian scene, so let's not
True.
pretend that they're magically going to be great about that one. Like they have a track record that's not great with development in Asia. So
It really comes down to how is that first CS2 major going to pan out for their scene, because if they do get a team into the playoffs or something, or they have a couple successful teams, then they get extra spots, then there's more incentivizing of playing in these open qualifiers, grinding through the RMR. But if we get the same result from them, I think we're just going to stagnate again, because then it just feels like an unfeasible task, right? That you're just like, oh, okay, well, anyways, there's only going to be 2 spots given over, and it's going to be Greyhound, and it's going to be obviously probably not Tai Lu at this point, maybe like a Cyclone or a Lin Vision, but you can't necessarily crack that, so why try? It's that kind of, again, doomer attitude about it. But if for some reason Cyclone makes the playoffs of the major or something, or makes Legends or something like that, then I think there's just more confidence in the region to push through.
Speaking about this, I mean, similarities in that what that region needs is, I think, more events, and there's already one like pretty impressive event on the calendar right now later down the year. So at least we can start
500K or
somewhere.
whatever. Yeah, I just love
Valve
like,
rankings.
Paladin. Yeah, I just love Paladin thinking that Advent's gonna make playoffs. Just fucking hilarious.
Let's see it, man. Let's see it. Lowest rated HLTV player. Let's see it.
That's not Solgo?
Yeah, I asked about that. He's the 5th lowest rated. The 2 lowest rated are is it
Solgo?
Hunden's the lowest? Hunden's the
Man.
lowest by like a
Solgo gotta be top 5.
Solgo's
Ocean?
top
Is it-
3. He's
Let's
third.
go.
Ocean?
Let's go.
I think it's Hunden, Ragin. No, it's another band guy. Another guy's band.
Ocean? Not Ocean?
No. It's not.
Ocean's not banned.
Nero looked it up.
Ocean band?
Hunden's number 1. Number 2 is also another guy banned. I think it might be Ragin, maybe.
Yeah.
And then
Like 2.
And Solgo?
Solgo's like number 3. Yeah. But
Nice.
Advent has like the most games played on LAN and on a big stage compared to like how wank his rating is. So
Yeah.
like I think he kind of wins basically. Like Solgo doesn't have as many LANs like with his lower
Keep
rating.
popping up those Fragadelphies. He'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Was he one of the ones who lost 7 a.m.?
This is a
He
good
is?
transition to NACS talk. If you want to rock on through with that. We're talking Fragadelphia, we're talking Solgoed here.
Yeah, I mean we can just
Yeah,
carry straight
yeah,
on.
sure, why not?
Fuck a cut, fuck an edit. Like
Yeah.
go point
Yeah,
2.
we don't need it.
Beautiful. Do we
Yeah,
edit it? Do you edit it normally?
Yeah, we edited a little bit.
Yeah,
but
we
can
usually
just keep
cut it.
rolling.
Who needs
Let
edits?
us know.
Who needs edits? Fuck it, we're
Mike's-
doing it live.
Mike's our transition god. He did
I'm
it
gaming.
on
I am a
every one of my
host.
messages.
I'm just
Yeah.
here. I'm looking at the clock. I'm going. You know.
I was
the
gonna
producer
cut
in
him
my
off
brain's telling me
eventually.
it's time to transition.
What was your
Look,
point
Nao was
there?
asking me about
Oh,
hosting
here,
tips
you
the
had-
other
you had a
day.
pretty
So
good
here's
one.
your
Yeah.
hosting tip. Yeah, you got to keep them schmoving. Keep it schmoving.
You're gonna love this one.
Your
Right
analysts
here.
start getting in the weeds. You just got to schmoove along.
Here you go. This
We're
one's
doing
for
it
you, then.
live.
Okay, so this is my point. I'll
It's a
kickstart.
chunky title.
I'll kickstart this in terms of what I'm saying. So first of all, Mike, when I say these points, these are like obviously like not where I stand, but I
Okay.
had to ask this to you, right? I had this in the pipeline a few episodes ago. But then when I knew we were getting you on as the advocate, one of the biggest voices for NACS, I have to get Mike involved with this one. So My point is, or the point I want to talk about is, in its current state, NACS is the worst it's been in the CSGO era, right? And this comes off the back of obviously recent news with Liquid, now obviously being EU, one less spot at the major. It's going to make things very difficult. And this is when I talk about its current state in the CSGO era, I'm talking about with us now transitioning to CS2. It's going into CS2 in its worst state. It is where I set this point up, basically. And of course, I'd love for you to kickstart us on this one. Basically, obviously, it comes off the back of things like Team Liquid, of course, going EU. That's not only an organization pulling out of the region just because of all the problems, but then you see other things as well where people talk about how the scrims are so shit and like nobody takes it seriously. FPL's a fucking mess. You got all of these things, right? So I want to get your point. Kickstarters, like right now, what are your thoughts on kind of just the scene as a whole?
In this particular phrasing, I'm going to go strong disagree. Got to change my background color here because I don't think you remember. Oh, that was a good red. I don't think you remember how shit the COVID era was for NA. It's not that it's not, that's great and hunky-dory right now. It's that this statement is egregious because there was a period in time where literally the only one drawing salaries in North America were Liquid and Complexity. And I'm not talking like, drawing a good salary. I mean, salaries, period. The only one. And Complexity didn't even used to be NA. They were in NA, right? It was EG in Liquid. It was EG in Liquid for a long time was it. So let's talk about why I'm actually pretty optimistic for NA headed into CS2. Don't get me wrong. This is about the shoots growing back in after the forest fire, but COVID was the forest fire. Right? We had a promising team in Gen G who won a LAN. The last LAN win for North America was Gen G right before the pandemic. The pandemic's starting up. They're out at Anaheim playing that DreamHack. That team had Psalm, who's now a dialing over in Valorant. Automatic was on that team. He's just been fired. Shout out to Psalm. Thinking about him.
Psalm just been dropped.
Maybe he'll come back to
not
CS2.
Wardell. Not Wardell. He was gone before then. There's no way Wardell was on that team. Kusta was on that team. Yeah, and fucking Bentet. And who was the last one? Who's the last one who I'm thinking of?
Daps?
No, because it was all the NA Asian guys. There was one more. Whatever. I'll think about it at some point.
Do some research on it.
We'll do some research. Do some research. But suffice it to say, that was gone. They didn't play anything that whole first year, and then they died, and half of them went to Valorant. Right? Then we had Chaos disappear after being the most promising team of the online era. The org gets deleted by Pusha T and Logic. Shout out to them. I hate you both. I'll never meet you. But I just want you to know that there's beef. There's beef because of that. If you somehow watch this, it was Daps. Damn. All right. Shout out Damien. So you lost them. You lost everything that was promising about that time. We had so many players leave to Valorant. And here's the really depressing part is we had so much institutional knowledge leave to Valorant. That was the huge thing. And what you're seeing right now, the reason why I'm optimistic about this point is you're seeing a lot of that institutional knowledge come back. Guys like Def, who's now coaching M80, coming back, one of the most experienced players competing in North America. Yeah, I know technically he was originally a UK CS player, but he's been here too long, baby. Yeah. He's got citizenship. He's NA now. You got guys like Steel coming back in, competing. You've got guys like Warden coaching teams. These are people who've been around in Counter-Strike for decades, who have that competitive knowledge, who maybe aren't as up on the current meta, but they have that knowledge of how to be a professional, how to compete, how to build a team, how to build a roster. So many of those guys left to Valorant. Guys like Ocean, even, who was a talent scout, Josh RT, Shinobi, who used to join random MDL teams and teach them how to play CS and then inevitably get kicked when he couldn't frag. But he taught them how to play CS first. That is the kind of thing that we lost with Valorant poaching those individuals. It's not guys who are going to make top 20 teams or top 5 teams or top 10 teams, but there are guys who are going to take raw NA talents, find them in advanced rosters and main rosters and FPL pugs, and teach them how to play the game. And that's what set us back so much. That's why, even teams like Nouns, who have had support for a little while now, they've had to learn because they didn't have that same institutional knowledge on their teams coming up. They were figuring it out together. Things that, the Swedish scene or the French scene or the German scene had learned a decade ago. We were kind of reteaching ourselves. It's like the Library of Alexandria burned and it was all Riot's fault. All of that knowledge was lost and NA went into a dark age and we're just now starting to emerge. So maybe we're not there yet, but I think this is going to be a renaissance because you have that knowledge coming back in, because you have players coming back over. I don't need, the young fraggers. I'd love to have them. If a Zeppa or a Leaf wants to come back over, open arms, baby. But it's the institutional knowledge for me that means that next crop of young fraggers is going to have a leg up from where people have been for the last 2-3 years. So firm disagree on that. Also, so that's one side of things. I'm getting long-winded, but I feel passionately about this.
No,
Go
so
for it.
point.
That's why I brought this point.
Talking about organizational support, losing Liquid fucking blows. They killed a major spot for us. They left. I don't think it's a good decision. I think they're going to be bad for a while. I'm not really sure what they're like. I guess I understand the thinking with, in Europe, we're going to have to be in Europe, so on and so forth. But I think it's short-sighted because I'm optimistic that CS2 will bring some revitalization to the NA scene. But I guess in the short term, I can understand it. Still, it sucks. That one sucks. That one really sucks. But we still have complexity. They've reaffirmed their commitment to a North American roster. They've signed a liege. They brought in, an established NA veteran. We have M80 coming in, where there's a huge amount of optimism around them. They've given a huge amount of organizational support to players who have never had that. Of the players on that team, Swisher, Mobs, Rec, Wolfie, Manx, right? The NA guys, not going to include Wolfie in that because he's played in Europe plenty. I've never had that level of organizational support. I guess Mobs might have for a second when he was on 00 Nation, but never like this, right? They were boot camping for a month before they even went to Europe, and then they boot camped for 2 weeks in the UK before Pro League. That kind of time, that kind of practice together, these guys just haven't had the chance. Every previous time that Swisher's gone to a European event, he's been on a team that was 2 seconds away from dying, and they all knew it at the time, right? Yeah. Like, just the fact that he can lose this event and learn from it without wondering what his next roster spot's going to be because the team's dead, that's huge. It's just something that we haven't had in North America. So M80 coming over, and I'm optimistic that other organizations like M80 might do the same. We saw XSET post about getting a women's team. I know they're delinquent on payment to other players, and maybe we don't really want them, but it shows the way the winds of change are going, right? All these orgs that cropped up and got hyped by Valorant and got some investment and have some stability there are now thinking about going to CS2. Lots of different things are going to be in motion, and I'm optimistic that investment's going to come back in. We've seen Wildcard, Reason come back. Like, they're lesser in terms of the amount of financial support they have, but it's still encouraging because it used to be that, maybe we only had 5 teams that were really salaried. But we had some of these teams where there's just a little bit of support, enough to get the guys together every once in a while, enough to get people traveling to LANs, enough to give people the justification to their parents to say, look, this is something. I can build on this. Look, I've got a contract right here, right? Like, I can continue to commit and build on this talent, and I might go somewhere big someday. So that coming back into North America has me very optimistic. Look, I'm always optimistic about NA, so maybe I'm a fool, but strongly disagree with this particular phrasing of the statement. NA is coming back, baby.
I couldn't have said it better. I really couldn't have. You covered all of the main points. I strongly disagree and then some. I think it is so... I'm just so excited for the future of North America just because I think finally the older players as well as the newer players are slowly starting to get to the same point in their careers in terms of the mentality that we have to join forces and we have to kind of build our way up again. And, you see the players like Stan, see coaches like Warden making that Forsaken unit. And I love that team so much. I mean, it is very anti-NA in a lot of ways where they're very slow and crawling in their defaults, but they're bringing up some fantastic players that are kind of just raw, as you mentioned, like players like Wiz, players like JBA, and who am I missing? Infinite as well. Infinite's definitely a loose cannon, but if you can find a way to rein him in and rein those 2 players in. Oh, right, 60. Yeah, I forgot about 60. Yeah, 60 is the other loose cannon on this team, but somehow they found a way to make this team look regimented, and they're playing a little bit safer this time around. I don't know how long that's gonna last, but I think that the fact that all of these players that are in rosters previous kind of turning a blind eye to it and just trying to get together a mix, play a season of ECL, see what happens, blow it up anyways, and then just go about the next season afterwards. I feel like a lot of these projects are now starting to stabilize and they're kind of looking at the future as though there is promise ahead and that we can start to make the foundations right now so that when we do get the opportunities for these RMRs, we can flourish, we can succeed and eclipse that of what we were showing from North America in that COVID era. But it's going to take some time. And I think all of these teams that are building right now are well aware of that, and they're starting to get that time and space to at least start to at least consider, you know, what are our options in CS2? How can we succeed in those open qualifiers, those closed qualifiers, and how can we push the better teams like Complexity? Even Complexity, their spot at the top isn't even guaranteed at this point. I mean, we looked at the Cole and I casted the IM Sydney qualifiers, right? And Complexity got battered the first day. They looked completely dazed by Forsaken and Nouns, and they had to battle back throughout that lower bracket, and they had to earn those spots. That spot was not given out for free. And sure, you can talk about the volatility in all of these rosters and that, oh, maybe Complexity isn't that great. But in my eyes, I would rather have healthy rosters to pick and choose from if I am these top orgs than just a deadweight scene of players that are not ready to jump up into the tier 1 space at all, which is a huge problem that we had for Liquid and Evil Geniuses prior, because these teammates that they had were just so raw and they weren't ready yet. But I think now that we are giving them more time and space, I think that makes me super excited for the future. I don't necessarily think this is the worst it's ever been. I look at the very beginning of CSGO, and NA was an absolute laughingstock to the scene. Sure, you had some raw, incredible talents. You had Swag, you had Chico, you had all of these players on the tippity top in terms of aim, but we were so out of the loop in terms of how to play the game. We were just so willing to just run out and try to kill people and hope that we could win. We had some cool results, sure, in a couple of majors here and there, but in terms of the international space, we were pretty much a laughingstock until, you know, slowly but surely we started getting org support. Teams started to kind of pick up in terms of the seriousness of the game, and I think we at least had some professional teams throughout that development. But I think that we're in a better spot now in terms of how everybody's taking this point in CS seriously and realizing that we have a lot of potential and it's just going to have to take a little bit of time for it to flourish.
You go. I'll finish off.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
I was going to come in at the end and be like, agree, shitters, get him out. Sorry.
Of course he is. I already know he is.
Yeah. I mean, I might have a different take than us for sure, I'd imagine. But I just want to, like, say there's not a lot, like you guys said, that I have to really change things up on. The one thing I'll note is that, you know, something like you mentioned, Ani, was that we have teams that are looking like they have players that are backing them up with severe wisdom. Like JBA here coming through, he was with Limitless playing
smart,
with a brand new roster and a lot of new ECL players. And now he's actually just looking like the prospect that people were hyping him up to be, and I think he's given the room with the players. We're not seeing the olden days of like NACS where you have a roster that needs a roster change, and then bam, they go back to their old player, right? Immediately go back to the same guy. There's actually people that you can look to in advance, like Mike was saying, and say, hey, maybe we get this guy instead. Maybe we give this guy a chance who is like kind of owning us in one of these scrims or matches, and we try him rather than just go for like let's be honest, like plus and minus John G in a roster. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's actually people that you can look forward to in that sense. And I think that's a key detail for the growth of the scene, is having like young up and comers replace him. Even Grizz on Party Astronauts is another one of those players, right? Both from Limitless, both have very little ECL experience, both aren't recycled talent, and they're coming through and they're actually doing some good work there. I think Grizz maybe on a lesser extent than JBA, but still he's had some impressive series so far. So I've really liked to see that. And on top of that, I want to talk about two teams that are really interesting right now. Wildcard and Reason are two rosters that are putting in so much work, and I think they have the resources now to actually like put in this work. They are able to, because they're all on the East Coast, scrim UK team, or not even UK teams, on UK servers, European teams, and they wake up at like 10 a.m. to get those scrims in. They're putting in that work all day, and like, you know, that's a huge difference than say like 2 years ago when again we had no tournaments even to look forward to. Now we're waking up at 10 a.m. to practice, not even for officials. So like you said, it was just I would say like the Valorant release and COVID era, North American Counter-Strike was just a wasteland, and we're getting back.
All right, Nail, bring us down to earth. Bring us
Well,
down.
okay, so I actually, contrary to popular belief, I actually do disagree with the statement, but not as much as you guys. And I think there's a few reasons, kind of in my mind. Obviously, I like to just piss off Paladin a lot, right? So I like.
It's easy. It is easy. Poking Ani is fun.
Yeah,
It's
amen.
great. Like
Amen.
it feels like a large part of like most weeks, right? So it's like, So sometimes you have to come prepared, right? But like I think when you look at it, so just first of all, quote me if I'm wrong, but during the COVID era, wasn't EG at one point ranked #1 in the world? Or was it just prior?
No, that was
With,
right
like,
when they
Tarek?
went to join the team. That was
Yeah.
after the ESL New York, they won 2019.
They won New
That's
York,
right
right.
before COVID. They
Right
hit the
before, yeah.
shitter streak pretty much immediately into COVID. They
Oh,
might have been
they
all right
they
for the
had
first
a-
year.
I think they
They had
did
a
win
collapse.
some online event though that put
They
them
had
up in the ranking.
the blast group before we went to
Mm.
COVID, and they lost to the new OG roster twice to get eliminated, and they got dropped down to the showdown at that point. I don't know if the showdown existed at that point, but yeah, they had failed. That was their starting of their downturn.
Yeah.
I remember that was like
So,
Cody's
like-
breakout event as well.
Yeah,
Showdown.
they did not do well in the initial online, as I remember. They were one of those teams
Okay.
where it's like, yeah,
Rough.
Furia
Good-
came out on top a couple of times,
Yeah.
I think.
not ideal.
Yeah.
Fury was great in the online era. Oh, they did win ESL 1 Cologne 2020 North
Yes.
America.
Yeah, that was the event that
Legit.
they won.
Legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it
and
was
they
like-
they did they did well in that CS Summit where they were where it was the RMR.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So I feel like there was like at least something to talk about, right? Where, you look at it now, you've got one team inside the top 30, none inside the top 20. That initially doesn't stem for a healthy tier 1 scene, really. And you've got, in my personal opinion, a pretty shit complexity. Like I don't actually rate this team, and I don't think, in my opinion, they'll ever really be competitive as they currently are with like actual good tier 1 EU teams. I like the individuals, but I think they still need to go through one more change. As much as I like the guy, I think probably maybe JT has to go, and they need to change things up. If JT goes, then so does DC. So maybe is a big overhaul. I think right now at the elite level, there's not a lot. I get what you guys are saying. I did a bit of the blast and A calls. There's some good like tier 2 teams coming through. NA, and like I know the owner of Reason. I speak to him quite a lot about NA, and he's actually also pretty hopeful about the scene. So I get decent insights on the tier 2 side. And it sounds very good, but I think overall losing a spot at the major with Liquid going to EU has pretty big implications. I
It's
think
bad.
it feels like we still haven't really recovered as a region, not in terms of the players, but as in terms of the TOs over in North America. And I think that's for me where I do feel a little bit worrying about NA. I feel like losing beyond the summer, obviously not your guys' fault at all, and it was actually after effects of COVID basically and money issues and whatnot. That's big, but I think just generally with like, while we've had an okay year this year, 2 big tournaments. What was it, Dallas and
and DC?
Houston?
DC.
that was
DC,
it. Yeah,
DC
yeah.
baby.
So like that's like it is good to see like the both ESL and Blast are happy to go to America and host tournaments, but I still think generally when it's just not really part of the circuit in a huge way where like the EU game like Cologne and Kato are so integral to the scene, or like I don't know if we're ever going to see a major really for at least the next couple of years in America. I feel like right now, first of all, it's fucking expensive unless you go into like the middle of like butt fuck nowhere. But yeah, that's what I think worries me. And I think
Oh yeah, because we host majors in cheap places like Copenhagen.
Well, no, but they have a good deal with the government. So
Yeah.
it's a different vibe. Unless you can get fucking Sleepy Joe on board, I don't think there's gonna be too much. Fucking guy finishes a speech like a Roomba walking around.
All
just
right,
a lost soul.
all right.
Like,
Look, all I'm saying is you, the South African, started out this statement shit talking and calling for the heads of the 2 South Africans on complexity. So
Yeah, that's
Hey,
why
yeah,
let's talk about who's
Where's
at
the
risk
loyalty,
nationally
man?
here.
Where's
Hey,
the
dude,
No
we're
loyalty.
talking
I
about
thought
loyalty, but
complexity
I
looked
think
good.
you should look at the honesty, right? It's I'm not blinded like you North American man, but like no, I think generally, until we get something, I saw an idea which I actually did quite like, where people were talking about having Pro League do one year NA, 1 year EU. That would be really cool. I think at the moment, NA is not in a bad state. It's not in the worst state it's ever been. I think the reason why in my head this point was always a disagree for me was I would just remember. I don't remember. I went back and have looked at and spoke to people who were there at the start of CSGO and just how shit it was. I was not watching. I'm honest. I didn't start until 2015. But yeah, it was a mess apparently, right? So it's obviously not as bad as back then. But yeah, for me, I think as a whole, the structure in NA seems a little bit janky at the moment, where like even for example things like Dallas and Washington, they did, if you just look at the stats, get pretty low viewership in comparison. Obviously I know time zones make a big difference in viewership, but I think all of those things will take knock-on effects, and I think until we have a structure implemented where it's like confirmed we're going to have, you know, this X amount of tournaments, because like if I'm right saying Washington's, it's not confirmed next year. Is that how it
No,
works?
no
It's
clue.
like,
No
yeah,
clue what they're
exactly.
gonna do. Spring
It's
summer.
honestly doubtful that it would happen, just considering.
Yeah, so
the way they've
that
done it.
worries me. I'm just looking at like stability essentially, and I think stability would tempt over more organizations from, you know, like bring back like a Sentinels, for example, or like 100 Thieves, right? I think, you know, Nature's spoken a lot about how expensive it is getting into CS, but if you had stability and saying, okay, we're guaranteed to maybe have like 3-4 tournaments in North America, I think like that as a whole would help the scene a lot in my eyes, rather than having one guaranteed with Dallas. I don't even know.
I
Dallas
think
is
Dallas
guaranteed
is
as well.
going to be
Dallas is happening
Yeah.
next year. Yeah, they've already confirmed that,
The-
or at least
Exactly,
the
so-
Dream
so-
Hack. So there'll be a CS event
the
at it. Yeah.
positivity
so you
that
got
Dallas
one,
got
right?
is pretty huge.
Probably
That's-
one challenger as well, with an like a version of
Atlanta.
Atlanta next
I'm
year.
assuming
I don't know if
Atlanta.
it'll be Atlanta again, but like realistically, it looks like the way ESL setting things up, you have at least one in America, which again, really good. But that's more tier 2 teams anyway. Which granted is pretty much North America right now, because Complexity are ranked 25th in the world, so they kind of fit in there. If you're thinking that like teams like, you know, if you've got like Movistar, who are now looking like a proper solid team, who are winning Challenger Kato, Complexity may as well. I mean, they played, of course, at Melbourne and got absolutely shat on. But realistically, I think it's a good thing that you have a few of these tournaments, but none of them are secure for me, and that's what does worry me a little bit. And I think just generally, I'm worried about the structure overall in North America. It seems quite janky, and I think every 2 seconds I'm listening at people talking about how bad scrims are, or like they're so bad that the pros are like, oh yeah, fuck scrimming in North America. Like we'd rather just go to Europe, which is not a bad thing, and it's good to have like. For example, if I'm right in saying, I'm pretty sure M80 are now going to be boot camping. I don't know, this might be a leak, so apologies if it is, but I'm pretty sure they're boot camping in Endpoints HQ for the next 4 months. So
Are they really that long?
Apparently,
That I
4
didn't know.
months.
That's sick.
So a pretty big commitment. I don't know if that's a leak, so apologies if it is, but like,
Yeah, that's a leak. That's definitely the first public statement.
yeah. Who gives a fuck?
Leak
right?
Okai, we call him.
Yeah, you know how it is. That's really good commitment, right? And I think that is a good thing, but I just do generally still worry because you've got no lock and key tier 1 teams, in my opinion. I call Complexity like a tier 1.5 team. That's kind of, I think anyone out of the top 20 in my eyes kind of feels like a 1.5. And that's kind of where I worry. And also then when it comes around to the RMR time, I then also get very worried in terms of like, what is actually a very strong world in which you could see like 3 of those 4 spots go South America, like without even like a second.
People say that every RMR, looking at the last RMR, what was it, 4 out of 5 teams were teams that compete in North America, and it would have been 5 out of 5 if Fluxo didn't get a good break on seeding, I'd wager, because we had Nouns Liquid for one of the spots instead of
to qualify.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Paqueta was their last match.
Yeah.
No, it was Nouns Fluxo. I think Nouns take it.
Oh,
Fluxo were
right,
not looking good at the RMR,
Yeah.
much less Paqueta. But look, don't get me wrong. It's not great in NA, but it ain't great in SA either. And I am curious about what, obviously, the Brazilian teams that were competing in North America and MIBR and Pain appear to be competing in Europe mostly now, at least MIBR. Not sure
MIBR's been
what the
boot
deals
camping
with
there for
Pain
2
yet.
months now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
so, they're there for the rest of the year, right? They're playing ECL EU, I think.
I believe so. So that may change things up. They may stay, just as strong and come back and compete in North American, but SA still doesn't get to claim them. Then they're European now. But it's just
the SA RMR, right?
Yeah, I mean the
So
Americas
that's a
RMR.
good thing. They're getting EU prac, EU officials on a regular basis, then going to South America and farming fucking, Cassidy
Same as
for some
M80
Corinthians.
in that case, though.
Yeah.
You know?
It'll be
Yeah,
really
no,
interesting to
absolutely,
see, if these teams spending so much time in Europe this season is going to be like a hyperbolic time chamber in terms of improvement. Because I mean, Complexity's been boot camping for a while now too. They were talking about it being a really intense boot camp. So I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious about that one because teams have been kind of experimenting with these long European stints, but it seems like everyone sort of acknowledged the reality right now that like this is what you have to do right now if you're going to compete, and that does suck for NA too because it reduces the practice for the teams that we have. But if they then come back and bring knowledge, that's the hope that'll
Knowledge.
speed
think
things up.
Another point that I
Knowledge.
also just remembered as well was with the circuit opening up in 2025. I think generally that will our complexity at the moment. I think actually I like M80 and I think there's actually a lot of hope for them. But I think like Evil Genius is fucked, right? There's just no chance. Like they are absolute dog shit. Like there's just no chance that that team. Like I'm sorry. Like I know you're a fan, boys, but like there's anyone outside of Automatic in that team, I just could not give a shit about, and I just don't think they can hang it with the big boys. And I think there's a world in which when things open up and it comes to an open circuit, and like I don't know how it will work in the episode. No one really knows how it will work. I don't know whether it will be like regional open circuits for like, let's say for example, like a blast and a showdown, for example. Like I don't know how
I'd be
things
very
would work.
surprised if they didn't give North America and South America a spot, like or a couple of
Yeah.
spots. Like I think it'll be region locked in that sense to at least qualify. So I don't think that the open circuit's gonna just rip any of these big teams to shreds. It's definitely gonna light a fire under their ass to perform, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's going to be like catastrophic for a region. I think honestly it's quite healthy to force these teams to play. As you can see, with Complexity being forced to play lower tier teams, they are having to pick up their pace a little bit more, get their mental in check, and kind of go at it. But if they have that kind of experience happening on a regular basis, eventually they'll realize. This kind of ties back to that open circuits conversation that we had last episode, where we were just like, if tier 1 teams, tier 1.5 teams, partner orgs get to go up against these like kind of newer teams, these teams that are like fighting to get through the open qualifier, close qualifier, eventually they will get their shit together and they will be able to fight back, and we'll get to see basically who is deserved of the top spots and who will flounder, and
I do
eventually
get worried
those
though,
pieces will move over.
because I feel like right now of North America, only Complexity are like a team that I would even like imagine making it to like a full final, for example, of like North America. Like, I can't really, I would never really imagine like an Evil Genius is making it, or like the Forsaken made it through like the Blast NA call. They're actually a pretty good team. I quite like Forsaken, but again, I can't imagine them in my eyes beating. I mean, a Liquid is still sticking around in North
Liquid
America
are
for
still playing it.
Showdown, but then you've got us like in my eyes like Furia, who I think. As shaky as they've been, I just think in my head I can't see a world in which into CS2 like Caterata is
I
not
think
like a
there's more
god.
threatening
Like
teams than Furia in South America now.
but Imperial
Hold on, we
also look
gotta-
pretty good. Like
We gotta have another match where Fallen accuses some 16-year-old of cheating and gets Brazil sicked on them. We can do this again.
Oh yeah, we got to go back. We got to go back. But like yeah, I do worry if things open up where they're like basically like you say like light a fire, but like I don't know. Like in my eyes, I feel like Evil Geniuses in CS have not made good decisions for a long time. Also, aren't like Evil Geniuses like most of the decisions made by like a VC. So it's just like I feel like a lot of them are like pretty rough anyway.
Hard to say how that one's gonna go since their CEO is now leaving and things will change.
Okay,
and
fair.
hopefully there will be a little bit more stability and direction. But what I will say, I am gonna push back a little bit on EG. Not to say that they're good. Don't get me wrong. They are still very much growing. But this roster is, even just talking about EG in terms of the worst in the CSGO era or whatever, the last 2 years of EG have been far worse than this, because those guys were getting paid big bucks, had big names, had big previous experience, and every time they entered a server, they just looked like lifeless husks getting shit on over and over and over and over and over again. This roster, I mean, don't get me wrong, Pro League was not a success, but you got to remember the matches they played. They played ENCE, then MOUZ. They played every map close against those two teams, except for, I think, every map they played close except for one where they got shat on by MIBR in a 3-map series.
Right.
Yeah.
They beat Rooster handily, which is good.
Whoa. Let's take a grain of salt there. Come on.
Yeah.
Heroic.
About handily? I think it was like a 16-4 and then a 16-13, something like that.
No, I'm talking about like
Rooster mattering.
Yeah. Come on.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you take the three opponents,
players right now,
the three opponents who I would rate, you've got ENCE, who I think is the I can't do it. You got ENCE, who I think is the best team in the world right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm taking them. You've
No,
got
I
and plays the consistency game. Doesn't
They
lose
pushed them
upsets.
though. They really pushed
They
them.
pushed
I
them.
thought
It
they
was like
had them at one
16-14,
point. Yeah.
16-14. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Mouse series, which again, Mouse is looking really fucking good lately, under Shuhei, and that was again a tight series.
They
With
had the
some,
lead on a couple of maps
So
for a little bit. Yeah.
I think
towards
there
the end.
is. Look, the results aren't there. I'm not going to pretend EG is a tier 1 team right now. Not going to pretend. But I think there is cause for optimism as this EG roster grows, which there just hasn't been for 2 years. So that I will put that grain of salt in there for, I just let you bash EG for a while, but I will say
No,
if they just stick with this team and actually let some of this talent develop, I think there is genuine cause for optimism in the way they're
look like a
approaching
team
it.
now, at least. Like the
Yes.
previous teams didn't look like a team. It would just look like 5 players just dropped onto a server.
Watching them
like
just
they
made
would
me
players
sad.
We're gonna get.
They were checking a box just to sign up for make sure they complete the Louvre agreement or whatever, just like rock up to the tournament. So I do agree. It feels like they've actually put some effort in here. But yeah, generally, I'm not as optimistic in the sense of I think NA is absolutely fine right now. I don't think there's any problems, but I just do worry about
There's problems.
with the I feel like with the lack of guarantees of tournaments, I'm more looked towards the other side.
Yeah.
I just think the only way in my mind to really spur on the next generation or to get some 16-year-old who's got a choice now between do I play Valorant or do I play CS, right? In my mind, things like that. He's gonna pick Valorant every day of the week. It's just way more secure money, way more opportunities at top level. VCT NA or whatever is insanely good at the moment. That league is really well done. And there's a lot of opportunities to go through. The tier 2 in NA is the best one in the world. No one else EU's is fucking ass. But NA's is really good and it gets really good coverage. It's done by the
Knights.
Knights guys, the Philly guys, and the production is really
That's fair.
good. So it actually
Pittsburgh, yeah.
feels like Pittsburgh. That's one, same thing.
All good.
It's an important distinction. Really not the same thing.
They're all the same. It's just one of the things I feel like it is right now. There's no incentive in my mind if you're a 16-year-old who plays both and is good at both to be right, why should I go to CS2 when a lot of the good names are still remain in Valorant from the famous names, so to say, remain over there. The kind of the. And also just the structure's really good. They've got this guarantee where it's well, if I make a team that goes to this, then I can see the pathway of how I go from this to then VCT, then I can play international. And but we've seen that with the EG guys, these guys who just won the most recent Masters or whatever. They were one of them was just two of them were just random puggers basically who kind of did a bit of both.
And then a week after they won, they orgasmed to take a pay cut. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's not say it's a great system over there that's working brilliantly for everyone involved.
That comes back to my point. Fuck EG, right, guys? So
that's fair.
Very few, Fnatic weren't doing that when they won 3 in a row. That's all I'm saying. So, but yeah, I think right now that's the thing that worries me. I think if there is a little bit more security, it's obviously having Dallas secured is sick. I think I'd love to see Pro League over to North America, but with the agreement of Malta, it's probably not going to happen for a long time.
Bring back Pro League finals in an arena where you had an NA Pro League and you had teams come from NA into the EU section, and then EU teams qualify to Pro League. That way, you can get the best of both worlds, and maybe you can confirm more NA teams to go over the pond and compete in at least a arena studio environment. I honestly think that environment is a little bit better than just a flat-out studio environment because you get to feel a little bit of a different environment when you're playing in that venue. At least you're not playing in front of a crowd, but you're playing in a venue, and that travel itself could change. But I would love to have something like that.
Look, bring back Global Challenge. Bring back Global Challenge. Let's do
That
ECL
too,
playoffs on land. Let's do ECL playoffs on land, baby. That'd be amazing.
Please. This is the thing, right? So I actually I think this season of Pro League is this season and last season, the two best seasons of Pro League I've watched since I've been watching since 2017, right? I'm very open and saying I hated Pro League before last season because it was just 5 weeks of the most mundane CSGO and it took away too much of the calendar in my opinion. I love what it is now. It's very sketch heavy, and I think that's where an arena would be actually quite tough doing sketch heavy stuff because you do need the studio for that. But if you can blend the both, if you can keep what Pro League
well, you
is
can do
now
that in the regular season, right? You can do that in the regular season and
blend
do
both.
all you can do all of that, but then it's you were playing in a league. There's so much time being spent in this one event. Let's give these teams that grinded through these long brackets, 3 brackets per group, and say, okay, we're made to the playoffs now. I mean, ESL especially, it's one of their marquee events, right? You want to kind of herald it to everybody. We've gone through grueling 5 weeks of playing. And now we have these best teams that have now qualified for this final stage of play. Let's
Yeah.
put them in front of a crowd and put pressure on them. And that's where,
That's
you'll
it,
see teams like a Movistar Riders who did make the big run, then they flounder or they rise up and they have that crazy Cologne run that they had as well. Like there's so many little things that I feel like would just be better if you
Yeah.
stick in that regular season semantics with what EPL is right now and then kind of big it up at the end with the arena. I think that would just be fun, but
And they can
neither.
do one each year. I don't think it's like, in my mind, doesn't seem to be that big of a problem, barring actually finding a place to do it, doing one in North America, one in the EU, and taking there's 2 EPLs a season, right? Why not do one in each? Obviously,
They can do it at my place.
exactly.
We'll pot some couches. We'll make it happen.
Exactly.
We can totally squeeze 10 setups into my living room.
So
Let's do
it's
it.
one of
Like
those
Cast
things.
of
I think
Millions
that
right
would
there.
be sick if you could do something like that. Obviously, like Rip Beyond the Summit as well. I think like tournaments like that, I think
Yeah.
really, in my mind, made NA great. Like I loved, like Beyond the Summit is like, we'll go in, like when Swag played for C9, like those sort of things, like those old school days, like that's when I started loving like CS. Like I used to watch old like Rank S videos. That was like I was always the biggest. I mean, Liquid was the first ever team I supported, right? And then it was EG under Tarek. So it's always been for me like. But I look at it now and think like I don't love NACS the way I used to when I started watching. This is why, like, for you, pal, and why I'm like quite a hater is because I came into CS and when I started watching it and when I got into the pro scene, it was all NA for me. I loved it. Liquid was the first team I supported. Then I became like a massive like Stewie and Tarek fan, and I loved Evil Geniuses. Despite the results, I was like diehard, right? I was loving NACS, and now I just don't have any love to it anymore. I just feel like there's so many bad decisions, and the scene seems to be slightly like shaky in my eyes. So that's where I'm a little bit more towards the middle, but I still do disagree. I don't think it's the worst, but I want to see a little bit more stability.
Yeah, well, Tarek and
That's kinda
Hiko
cool.
were streaming CS2 recently, so
Stewie's
They're
been
back,
streaming it
baby.
a lot as well.
yeah. So
Stewie's been
Peanut
streaming it
brain
loads.
back.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we
Man, if
can
Stewie comes back.
we can just move on to our next topic as well. We'll just keep the
Slide us in here.
just keep
I'll
the themes
re-neutral up
rolling
my
here.
color scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to blue. All right. So
Blue
this
rule.
is
Yeah, there we go.
this is the last one. This one again, it obviously won't be a lot of like statistics or anything like that to really talk about, but I just wanted to, because a lot of us have been playing a lot of CS2, right? Is just get the initial discussion on how we think it's going to be played out here when it comes to this new scene and stuff, because right now I feel like the difference in gunplay is pretty it's pretty drastic when it comes to like the switch between spraying and tapping. I don't know if it's going to change either. I feel like maybe they'll fix some hitbox stuff and things of that nature, but I don't think it's going to change. I think like maybe that's kind of the direction that we're going to when we talk about CS2. So my question is, how do we think it's going to affect like the top teams right now?
Go for it, Mike.
I'm trying to decide if I want to go first or if I want to go last. I have my opinion, and it's very firm, and I don't think anyone's going to change it. But I'm trying to decide if it's more interesting. Whatever. We'll keep the system what we going. I disagree. I actually disagree with this one, and here's why. I think it'll be different from the transition of like 1.6 to Go versus Go to 2 now. First off, just looking at the top 10 right now, I'm just going to list those out so that we have a reference point here. Number one, this is going on HLTV right now today, as of us recording it, whatever this is. Vitality, 1, ENCE 2, G2 3, Heroic 4, Astralis 5, FaZe 6, 7, Cloud9, 8, Na'Vi, 9, Gamer Legion, 10, Mouse. Holy shit, Gamer Legion still 9. Good job, Gamer Legion.
So just count number 11 because I don't think that
Number 11's Virtus Pro.
Okay.
Number 12's Monty. So here's why I don't think there will be as radical a shakeup. I think there will be names that come up. I think that there will be maybe even teams that come up. But I think certainly there will be individuals who grind the shit out of the new game and prove themselves. But here's why I don't think we're going to see a radical shakeup in terms of org hierarchy. Because of how established orgs have become and because of the systems that have been built. Even just looking at those top teams, think about how many new names are in those top teams in the last 2 years, right? Players like Spinks coming through, Flamesy coming through, and Vitality. In ENCE, you've got Madden, you've got Nerds, who've completely changed the team. In G2, you have Monacy, who's become so much of the identity of that roster. Heroic has a bunch of the young Danes, right? Teams have gotten a lot better, about reading talent, promoting talent, moving on with that. They have a lot more structure in terms of analysis, in terms of financial support, in terms of just being entities. So I don't think those orgs are going anywhere. I don't think those teams are going anywhere. We might see the roster shift slightly. We might see new talents come through as people figure out the game more. But I think a lot of the current stars of the game are young stars. When you talk about a Monacy, you're talking about a Zywoo, you're talking about a Flamesy. These are the kind of guys who are going to grind the shit out of that new game and be the ones to figure out the new thing, to figure out the next thing. So I don't think it's going to shift dramatically. I really don't. I think that there will be upstart teams. I think there will be upstart players in a big way. But I think that teams and organizations have become established to such an extent now versus where they were in 2012, 2013 when you were making the transition from 1.6 or Source into Go in a way that you're not going to see that hierarchy radically shuffled.
The reason I wanted to ask this is because I just, again, we've all been playing a lot of CS2 and just noticing the changes and the way that things have taken place in terms of like spraying versus topping. I'll just talk about that as a particular topic as well, because when we talk about like stars and stuff and like really good players, really good players that can control spray like a Lees or something, like big win conditions for teams, like that's going to shift the way that these rosters change. And I guess like I don't expect to see like legacy orgs drop out. I guess I just more so expect like say G2 to maybe like come out of the gates and probably dominate a little bit more than they have been, having a huge change with like basically like a Nico buff, I'd imagine, when it comes to like his play style and things like that. So I feel like the stars that have been building up and becoming more of a influence here are going to switch up, and they're going to have a lot to learn very quickly, especially when we're talking about like the immediate shift. Like if one day CS2 comes out and bam, we're on events on CS2, I don't think a lot of teams right now, especially like right now, teams like INTS, I think INTS is clearly putting a lot of work in CSGO, like playing, developing, and that's going to, maybe take a toll on their aspect as well. Like, are they going to be able to easily and comfortably shift into gear when it comes to CS2? Meanwhile, you have maybe teams that are taking it a little bit easier right now. I know teams are taking it a little bit easier right now, especially with the remaining events this year that have been focusing a little bit more on CS2, and now you're going to see those rosters start to build up. So that's my big concern right now, is that we're going to see that shift, and pretty much like long term, it's kind of incentivized to kind of shift in that way. Like I feel like maybe we're going to see INTS get left into the dust a little bit if they're not putting in that amount of work in CS2.
Yeah, I'm gonna go slightly agree here. I don't think it's gonna be drastically shifted. I think you'll have some crazy upsets initially, especially with like certain teams like already scrimming in CS2. I'm seeing like IKLA play CS2 now, like starting scrims, and they've got like
They've been doing it
like
for months.
Yeah.
Like, they've been
yeah,
doing it for a long
and I'm
time.
telling you, some of these results are just going to be outlandish out the gates, I think.
Alright.
I think it'll fall, it'll be very a flash in the pan type of situation, but I think those
The
initial
majors coming
initial
up too.
upsets will
like
happen.
like the RMRs are starting at the beginning of next year, right? The open qualifiers for the RMR. That's not a lot of time. That's not a lot of time for Valve to fix all these hitbox issues. It's not a lot of time for them to change the way that we shoot our guns in the game either. So I don't know.
I think I need to ask a quick clarifier here, because I'm realizing that there's a qualifier on this. What's our time frame? Let's say CS2 comes out, gets enforced
First
after
year.
Pro League,
Let's just say first
right?
year.
First year? Okay, then I stick with my answer.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that this is a completely different game. Like it is not Go Plus. It is not like Go 2. It is
Go with fancy
its
graphics,
own
yeah.
thing. Yeah, it is its own thing. And I think that objectively it is just a completely different game, and we have to kind of set the bar back at zero. Like players like Zywoo, players like I'll give the example of like Forrest and Neil, right? They were pretty good in Go, but they were gods in 1.6, and I'm telling you, it does feel like there's a difference in the movement, there's a difference in the gunplay, and all of these things are little changes here and there, but they mean a lot to a pro, when the difference between the best and great is like 2%, 1%, and you really need some of these players to feel completely in tune with the game. So I'm completely expecting players like Simple, players like Nico, players like Device, all to be tip-top shape in terms of form, but are they going to be at the absolute elite? we have yet to see. And I think that is where I feel a little bit nervous, where a lot of the power dynamics in terms of all of these teams kind of start to shift. And I don't necessarily know where it's going to fall, but I don't feel comfortable pegging any of these teams to be just comfortable completely out the gates in CS2. I really don't. Just because one, they're spending so much time in Go for, as you said, Cole, and then the other is just that I think it is just a dramatically different game in terms of how it's to be played. That I think a lot of just fundamental things, jiggling, the whole concept of jiggling for information, that's at risk now. It feels like a real risk where I sometimes I'm getting
100%.
shot when I'm behind a wall,
100%.
and I'm sure that thing can change, hit reg can change, and on all of that. But I feel like I'm getting shot when I'm still behind the wall, and we've you and I, Cole, we've taken clips and we've replayed them, and we've seen where we're getting headshot from behind a wall, but we're in front of the wall on
Yeah.
their screen or something like that. But
Dude.
stuff like that, I just feel like those info plays and the way that people are going to approach the game has to be taken completely differently. So that's what I'm kind of worried about as far as right now.
An important clarifier, I think. I'm going to give two rebuttals. First, to your point about like information, hit reg, things like that. LAN CS is different from online CS. LAN CS2 is going to be different from LAN or from online CS2, right? Issues.
Yeah,
I expect
that's
issues
fair.
with jiggling, issues with hit reg. You can't jiggle in online CS the same way you can in LAN CS anyway. We know this, right? Like things
Yeah,
hit
you get
differently
punished
in terms
more,
of the way
though.
it plays.
On LAN, I feel like you get punished more for
You do.
jiggling, though. And in
Yeah.
this, you're getting punished a lot more online for jiggling. And
I've got
you
5 might be getting punished a lot more on land, but I'm just saying we're not going to know how that exactly behaves until we see it,
That's
right?
fair.
And then also I'm going to use your point about Forrest, actually. I think you're misremembering how good Forrest was in the beginning of Go. He was the number 2 player 2013, number 7, 14, number 16, 15,
Right, but the
number
drop
7,
off, right.
16.
But
No,
the
back to number
drop-off
7,
was
16, man. First 4 years of the game, he was a top 20 player in the world. He was still a god in Go. 87-0 NIP run, right?
But he was not nearly as good as he was in 1.6. I'm telling you, he's great, and I'm saying that the players that are in Go are gonna still be great. Players like Simple, players like Nico are still gonna be great, but they're not gonna be at the absolute peak of their powers. You're giving these numbers, right? He was 1-1-1-1-1 all at or 2 at the very least when he's going back to back with Neo. Like I think that there is still a drop off. It's minuscule, but there is still a drop off, and I still think that's going to have an effect. Maybe
And
like I really think there will.
we're in a different state too with like how things were in the tier 2 space back then and now, where like now tier 2 teams are actually just spending 12 hours a day practicing 5 days a week, scrimming their hearts out, whereas back then I feel like tier 2 teams, there's no way they're putting that same time. And tier 2 teams, they have the same resources, or at least similar resources to what some of these rosters do have in tier 1, so it's tough to make that comparison to the how that was back when like we switched from 1.6 to Go or Source to Go.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of a rebuttal here. So I've got 2 different answers and 2 different time frames, right? Just because obviously we kind of brought up the thing.
Different answers.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
So the
so
first
within the
tier.
next year,
Fence sitting.
So within the next year, let's say 12. Let's say all of 2024, right? Oh, we've got that double head in there. Damn. So
Oh no, Kai.
for year 1, I sit about where Paladin is. I'm pretty strongly agree. I do think that essentially basically all the points you guys have raised, right? In the sense of like tier 1 teams just aren't playing CS2 right now, where I know for a fact tier 2 teams are grafting the shit out of it. I know multiple like actually really good teams, having spoke to the players and seen what their schedules are, and all they do is scrim CS2. That's actually all they do. They're not even playing CSGO anymore. But like they've not gotten, you can look at the HLTV, they've got no officials the last 2 months because all they're doing is playing CS2, right? So I know for a fact the teams who are putting in work with good players on good teams, who their whole purpose is we have to qualify for the RMR, and we're at a massively distinct advantage of qualifying for the RMR because we just have more hands-on time here. It is a different game.
And that makes
game.
sense too.
It plays and feels different, and it is going to affect even the best players in the world are still going to feel some effect. Like I think there's a few instances where it won't. Messi is probably the biggest one I go towards. Where for people like for me, I just think he is still going to remain. I think it arguably probably will end up, in my opinion, within the next couple of years, be the best player in CS2. Like he just is that guy who puts in so much time, and that's what feels like is benefiting massively in CS2 right now. But within
Sorry, who is this?
Manesi, I think like he'll be like the best player in like
Oh,
a
okay.
couple of years' time. Is just like undoubtedly. It is rare, Sam. But basically, I think generally like teams are putting in so much effort now for the RMR, that opening one, which is going to be a lot of names that maybe we're not expecting. I think Ickla's one has been very public about it. I don't really actually believe in that team that much. But and also
No,
they're
I'm
also,
not.
yeah,
I think it's just an example.
Ikla number one.
Yeah,
Ikla number
they,
one.
They're also pracking against each other. So it's Ikla main team versus the Ukrainian team. So I don't know how much like external stuff. I know teams are getting a lot of work in. So the RMR I think will be quite wacky in a very good way. Especially that open qual, man. Like best of ones on MR12 on CS2. Fuck me, dude. Like we are gonna see some. Yeah. Just fucking sit on that for a second. Lose 2 pistols. Fucketh, mate. You are done. So that for me. But I think in a year and a half onwards, like a year and a half to 2 years onwards, I am as far strongly agree as you can get. I am as far down that right hand side as you
Strongly
get.
disagree or agree?
I agree. I am like all the way. So like I'm kind of like a little bit after like 1 year where I still think that the teams at the top, because obviously tier 2 teams are gonna have hands on time but not a lot of it. So I don't think it's gonna make like a massive difference. I still think the big boys are still gonna be hitting, but in like a year and a half onwards, like especially when the circuit opens up, especially I am like dead set in my mind that I think this top 10 will be so different. Like you can invest all you want, but I just think when you see, especially also this is partly breaking the system, but I love doing this. But like Valve's ranking, garbage, right? All in agreement.
It is pretty garbage.
Fucking
We're 3 months
right?
out and it's still garbage. I'll just say that much.
PU, right? So shit stinks. But like winning on prize pool, that's fucking hilarious, right? Like, let's set up another
Best tier 1 CBSC.
Russian LAN, which is invite only, and make it mega money, right? Like, it's sick. I love it. Thunderpick, 500 grand, dude. Whoever wins Thunderpick, like, can you imagine if it's like just like some like rando team? They're getting top 10. Like, it's 500.
It's gonna be Falcons,
like,
100%.
Yeah, it's just nuts, right? So like the rankings are wank, but because of that, I generally think I think invest what you want. I have such belief in like a lot of these tier 2 teams who like when the circuit opens up, we've already started to see influx of it a little bit. Call it one team wonders or whatever, but like when you got Game Legion, Apex, Into the Breach going top 8 at a major, that for me is already quite shock value in a closed-off circuit in the one open tournament, right? The one time we've opened the tournament of the year where there's no Louvre agreement, there's no blast invites where, for example, Ents having to fight through fucking showdown to get to a full final, like when they're the best team in the world. Like that to me, means in my head, I can't picture a world in which we don't see more tier 2 teams make big runs because they're just adapting better. They're just like working harder, simply as, and there's no denying, like some of these tier 2 teams, like how hard they work. Like, I always remember like, they're pretty shit now, but in Tropic back in 2020, they had like 3,000 maps played at the end of 2020. Sinners, the same thing under like Oscar. Copenhagen Flames when they made that big run, 2 different majors in a row when they were making deep runs. So like for me, I just think when the circuit's completely open, that's when I feel like I'm going to see like things completely change, because some of these tier 2 teams, man, they don't give a fuck about work-life balance, dude. Like they like not to say that tier 1 teams do. Also, a lot of those guys are actually pure no-lifers, arguably in sometimes in a worse way. But I think there's a difference as well for me when you incorporate traveling. Like the amount tier 1 teams travel and shit makes their life very difficult to come back from traveling and then like not have like jet lag if you're North American or if you're Australian or whatever. But like these tier 2 teams, they don't leave home. Like there is like an imprint of them in their chair. Like they are there. Like, dude, like, so that for me, I just feel like just logistically, because they're not flying around the world, they're not, that for me feels like when this circuit opens and it's open quals to get to places, I just feel like things are going to change a lot, like investment or not. But granted, I think what you were saying, Mike, in terms of like the orgs, I also understand that a lot, where I just think like the big guys are just going to buy the best players. Like there's no two ways about it. They've got the most pulling powers. There's a world in which I think organization wise, the top 10 stays the same. Or not to say the same, or it is like relatively similar, where it's all the big boys, all the guys with the most money, G2, Vitality, I was gonna say FaZe, but hey, we see their Nasdaq. All of these like guys with like money just buy the best players. It's simple as, because they've got the biggest pulling power. But the players within there could be so different in my eyes. I think this is a kind of a bad example, but a good example in my eyes. Like, I don't know if you guys know who Male09 is.
Yeah.
He's like this 14-year-old basically who's like 1 FPL. Like, he's won like 4 times
He's
this
crazy.
last in the last like 8 months. Like he's like a 14-year-old. I think he's German. I think.
Is he, I
Like,
thought
or
he was Swedish.
Oh yeah. One of those, and he's just cracked, and he's 14, right? So like, it's like people like that who like he doesn't go to school, dude. Like those are the kind of guys who like the Manesi regens basically coming through, or
Mm.
like
Donk.
everyone is like everyone. Yeah, I was gonna say everyone's fucking sucking him
Donk,
off, but Donk is a great example of like.
Don't use that phrase. He's 16, bro.
Okay, yeah, no, but bad phrasing, but you know what I mean, right? Like it's like these young guys who just like are like the talk of the town right now. Not a great example of him, or like even like there's probably like worlds in which we see like these like raw pugging guys come through and make a really good run. Like I don't know, like I always like the really aggro like like Turkish rifles, for example. I think they're gonna do really well in CS2, right? Like look at the Zantares regens, basically the guys who just like big swing, and that is like kind of implemented in that region so much. I mean, we talk about it with like Furia as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a world in which like the names within the top 10 are so different. Like a lot of the old guard, like I would not be surprised to see someone like as outlandish as this is, like see someone like Dupree and Carrigan like at the next major retire on stage, right? Like that wouldn't even be like the most like out there thing, like Dupree's just a kid, hasn't he? So like he might just call it if he's even there, right? And then Carrigan, like with like how up and down it is, you get to a point where it's like, hey mate, you may be the best of all time, and you are, in my opinion, the best IGL of all time, but you are getting on a bit, and your team is struggling, and fundamentally they are going to look towards you. So I think the names might change, the orgs might not, but I think CS2 for me, I'm so agree that it's going to be so different in my eyes.
I like this spectrum. It's 1v4 or 1v3 rather, 1v4 2 naos.
1v4,
So
yeah.
I'm ready for this. I will say now I think you've made some good points, and they're points that I hadn't necessarily considered. Which first off, the open circuit I think is going to change things more than CS2 will, because you'll have more gamer legions, more Monties that can make that push through because they've got the ability, they've got the talent, they've got the grind. So that to me is more likely to shake up the top 10 than actually just the new game. Also, I do think, yes, there's very likely going to be a crop of older players who say, you know what, I don't really want to learn a new game. Maybe now is the time to call it. Who knows which ones they're going to be, but that is reasonable. But we were probably getting to the point and go where some of those names would step away anyway, right? It's just a natural life transition. So to rebut one point that I think that both Cole, you and Ani were making, the idea of teams that are already grinding CS2 versus teams that are playing CSGO because they're competing in it right now. Here's why I don't think that will be that long of an impact. And it's the same reason why I think the skill gap of tier 2 and tier 1 have actually flattened immensely and everyone has reached such a high level. It's because of the easy availability of information right now. Because we have things like Nader, like Refrag, like Starcaller, like Skybox, where there are so many teaching tools and so many resources right now, and so much dissemination of information that as soon as it's on a demo somewhere, fucking Nart's tweeting about it. You know what I mean? You throw one smoke that someone hasn't seen, you cheese one angle, one pixel walk. Nart knows that shit. He's putting that out there. Like people are cutting up 6 different demos. It's in a highlight reel, right? And so that information is just out there, right? And anytime something gets put into an official, it's immediately a data point that people are looking at, and teams have analysts and teams have coaches and teams have staff who are looking at those things now. So now it's not, oh my god, he just broke that out at the major, like I'm seeing this shit for the first time, right? Olaf boost, whatever it is, that gets spotted somewhere, someone figures it out, everyone's seen it. And so I think that the teams that haven't had the same opportunity to tackle CS2 as a team as maybe an ICLA, I don't think that buff's going to last that long. I think it'll last 3 months. That's my guess. Before teams go, look,
that's pretty close to the fucking major, dude, or to the RMR.
But it's not the major. It's not the RMR.
I don't rate ICLA. I think there's more. Well, there is. I know for a fact there's more teams who are like full in CS2 who I think will make a big one. I might even like at some point just like make a list of the guys I know and just see and just go from like now, for example, right, where they're not playing any HLTV officials on CSGO and they're basically purely scrimming CS2. They're declining tournament invites. Basically. Just focus on CS2.
It was simple. He was talking about it last EPL. He was saying if you're in a tier 2 team, you should be doing this. You should be grinding for CS2.
A lot of them are, right? And there's like a lot of hubs now being made as well, which is like scrim hubs, but like kind of unofficial. But with you know, all the malarkey. We're not probably we won't get into that, but all the malarkey about like hard locking 64 and like Facer and whatever. All of that shit. Like they can just make a 10-man lobby, right? Essentially in CS2. There is ways of doing it. I'm not exactly sure how you do it, but there's ways. I think now that's where things are really interesting. Where I think like those guys who have a couple months advantage. When it comes to the open quals, I just feel like they will have just a little bit more hands-on experience. Like, not to say that, you know, Blast finals, dude, that finishes December 18th. It's not exactly like it's pretty close. Like within 3 months of the RMR. Like
But
those
here's
guys
the
that
thing.
are finals will not be playing CS2 at all. And then they're
The
gonna
open qualifiers are early January.
yeah, that's what I mean. The RMR
For the
itself is
RMR,
in
yeah.
March. But
Look,
the open quals are in Jan.
Tier-
There's no time there. There's no time.
Tier 1 players are losing their Christmas break, and I'm sorry for them. That sucks.
Yeah,
It's going to
sure.
suck for them this year. But they're definitely going to be playing. I just think, I think that, you know, the time frame we gave was a year, right? By a year, I'm not as worried. I think this first major might be fucky. I agree,
Yeah.
especially with the open format and MR12. I think it might be real weird.
Yes.
I would love for things to go to BO3 at some point. Just, you know, once we see how quick MR12 can run. Just because, I mean, we already saw with this last major, shit got weird.
Yeah.
But we'll see if it continues. But I don't know. I think in a year we'll see it stabilize a lot, and we'll see, you know, the playing field will be leveled. That early adopters advantage, I don't think is going to be relevant a year from now.
And I also
Yeah.
think that vet experience, the vets that do leave, hey, congratulations on a storied career. But the veterans that stay, they're going to be worth so much for a lot of these top 10 teams that I think that can actually extend a lot of their lives even further into the tournament. Just
Even
by
if they retire, they can go to coaching too, though.
yeah, exactly. And we've seen again, if I have to compare to 1.6 and 1.6 to go, it's like again some of these players that are old. They step back, they start coaching. You look at Zonic, of course. And
Neo,
you look at
he's back, baby.
sure, Neo as well.
He's back.
But I mean, there are options for a lot of these vets to move back and either IGL or coach, and that is also going to be super valuable because I'm sure some of these orgs will lock them up immediately just off of the pedigree alone, and that could help as well. If we're talking top 10 teams, that could also be just super valuable for some of those orgs. I don't know if it actually will come to fruition, but I think it's definitely a possibility that maybe vets could provide a little bit more.
Yeah, I also think like the roles in my eyes feel like they're going to change. Obviously, again, we talk about the peak advance thing, which probably will get adjusted or changed at some point. I feel like it kind of has to, just because it is like it's kind of fucked right now. But like, if it isn't, it means
If it
that,
doesn't,
like,
Ani's head will explode.
yeah, and
right.
if it doesn't, it will change like fundamentally, like when you're picking up certain players, how you pick them up. Because if everything is on, you know, big swings, for example, you can't pick up passive AWPers, right? So it means like, you know, for me, like if I'm looking at like tier 2 AWPers that I'm looking towards to kind of build around in CS2, I'm looking at someone like a Wonderful, for example, like super aggro, dude. Obviously, his recent form's insane, so that's obviously like a little bit like a recency bias there, but also like his playstyle kind of feels like a fit CS2, super puggy, like big swinging with the AWP kind of thing, like playing fighting fire with fire. I think that's kind of what you need to do against some of the rifles right now. Like I like loved AWPing and Go, and I find AWPing very hard in my style, which is very angle based and quite passive. So now I've had to start being uncomfortable and actually swinging with an AWP, which has netted me way more success than what I was doing previously on Go. And I feel like that's where things change a lot. So I feel like as well in the rifle core, obviously it might change things in that sense too, where like you pick up a lot of these young riflers just because mechanically they're just a step ahead. They might be like kind of dumber, so it makes the legends who stick around more valuable. But you need to have a core of like basically very mechanically extremely heavily based, rather than this, I don't know, what we have now, which is very util meta based.
Personally, I hope they keep wide swinging this powerful, because then NA's back, baby. We're
That is
in.
true. That is
MOTM,
true.
HLTV #1, wide swing king in here, baby.
I think it'd be interesting, right? I think things are going to shake up for just the raw fundamentals of the game alone, which is exactly how it should be, right? It's a new game, like, and I think like that's the biggest thing that like I love, like when you see people like Loeb and Jika like crying, like it's a new game, dude. Like I don't know, like you can compare to CSGO all you want, and Valve will probably just look at you and laugh. Like it's a new game fundamentally, the same way people did the same thing from 1.6 and Source to Go. Like it is just a different game. It's meant to be a different game, and that's where like, you know, we can make our predictions, but it's so fucking hard to make any sort of understanding with how the circuit is. We're changing to the Valve rankings, which are just something. And if things stay the same with MR12 best of ones, the upsets that are going to happen in that January is going to be insanely brilliant for all the wrong reasons.